one of the things that needs to be done is you need to remove loyalty 100%, because loyalty is what's kept Dennis Lindsey in position. And I'm telling you now, the single biggest issue with this team and the guy who performed the least is Dennis Lindsey. And if you go and look at Dennis, who was the GM, now president of basketball operations, you look at his job performance, and I'm just curious about why he's had such unbelievable job security, because he hasn't drafted well. He hasn't spent your free agent money well. He overpaid Rudy Gobert. He overpaid, guys like Bojan Bogdanovic. You overcommitted to guys like Joe Ingles. And I think if you leave it in place, are you telling me he's not going to extend Bogey and Jingles in October when they're eligible? I would certainly hope not, right? So I think if you're going to start rebuilding this team, Jake, I think you have to look at Dennis Lindsey.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. I agree with the word mentality. I think that's where this entire offseason begins. Who do you want to be? Because right now, you're a team that's good enough to make the postseason every year, but you're not a team that's good enough to win a championship, and that, to me, is one of the most difficult positions to be in, because it forces you, just like you were just saying, it forces you to make tough decisions and to put your loyalty aside, and I look at some of these players, and again, it's no shade to the player. It's just who they are. So like Bogey, for example, he is a guy that is primarily a shooter. He can give you a little bit of paint scoring, but primarily he's a guy you want standing in the corner or on the wing shooting that three ball, because he shoots in the low 50 percentile for three-point shooters. I mean, that's what you want him doing. Yet the Jazz are asking him to do a ton more, and they're asking him to do it on fewer opportunities. So, that to me is not a recipe for success. I would love to see them replace a guy like Bogey with someone who's more athletic, can give you more ways to play offense, and at the end of the day, requires more of the ball. Because I think that's another big thing within this conversation that we have to talk about. This team cannot continue to be Donovan and everybody else. They have got to get another guy who is just as good as Donovan Mitchell. I think that's where my thought process would begin. So guys who I would be looking to utilize to do that would be the Joe Ingles of the world. It would be the Bojan Bogdanoviches of the world. And then obviously your lower end, guys on the roster. But I just don't like the dynamic of this team. That's like the best way I can say it. I don't like the setup. I love Donovan Mitchell. I love what he brings to the table. Guy's a superstar, putting up 40 points on one leg. Like, I think he's shown you everything you need to see. But I don't like the fact that this team relies on Rudy Gobert. I don't like the fact that Rudy Gobert is getting singled out and, thrown to the wolves because he got exposed as a big. Like, it's frustrating.
But it's not his fault he got exposed.
Yeah, it's not him.
And I say the same thing, about George Niang, who became the butt of a lot of anger from Jazz fans. It's not George Niang's fault. It's not Rudy Gobert's fault that the Utah Jazz handed him a $205 million contract that they cannot trade, and they're really handcuffed by it. That's not Rudy Gobert's fault. That's Dennis Lindsey's fault. And I look at the way business has been done on this roster for the last decade, and there is a very clear reason you have not won. And I think that you got very lucky that I'm not going to say you fell into Donovan Mitchell. You made a deal and you got Donovan Mitchell. But again, if you're going to win a championship, you have to draft better. Because I look at the way the Phoenix Suns are built. Most of their money is spent on guys that they've owned. And their one real main free agent is Chris Paul, who has come through in spades for them. And I think if you look at the rest of that roster, Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, certainly that's their guys. They've developed those guys. They've turned them into the players they are today. The Jazz can't say that same thing. If you look at the other model, the other way you do that, you buy a ring. Well, you look at the LA Lakers. The Lakers didn't sign long-term foolish deals that have landlocked them. You have guys that are on 1 and 2 year deals that are tradable dollar amounts. Obviously they got very lucky with Dennis Schroeder turning down that extension. But Dennis Schroeder will be in demand this offseason. So I look at the teams that have won and are going to win, and they've all done a much better job in personnel They've all done a much better job in the draft. I mean, how did the LA Lakers wind up with Anthony Davis? Well, they traded Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram in part to get Anthony Davis. They've got a guy in Kyle Kuzma who they're going to trade and leverage to upgrade. So the Jazz can't say that same thing because they haven't done that. And it's been a real struggle for the Utah Jazz. And the guy that I point to is Dennis Lindsey. He's gotten a free ride for years now, and that's got to come to an end. If you want to blow this team up, blow the front office up, because Quinn Snyder's my head coach of the Utah Jazz. It is not Quinn's fault that this team is not still playing basketball. We can argue about adjustments he should have made or small ball or whatever you want to do. Fine, I'm open to that. But Quinn Snyder's not the reason that this team didn't advance to the Western Conference Finals. Dennis Lindsey is a singular reason. Their front office is a singular reason. Ryan Smith, it's time for you to step up and be a leader and make difficult decisions. You wanted to be in the top spot. You wanted to own an NBA team. Well, congratulations, you do. Now's when you become unpopular. And I think that, to me, that's the biggest question is, does Ryan Smith, the owner of the Utah Jazz, have the cojones to do what needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, I right now he's going to get the benefit of the doubt with me. I mean, I want to say yes, just because it seems kind of silly to me to go out of your way to spend that much money to buy an NBA organization, only to not put your stamp on it, as I like to say, only to not go and make all those moves, only to not create the team that you want this team to be. Like, that would be very surprising to me. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. So, like, if I'm Ryan Smith, I'm saying, hey, we've got a great team right now, but, you know, being great isn't the goal here. Winning championships is the goal. You know, what can I do to make that happen? And I think, again, you know, what have we heard all offseason or during the season? You know, hey, they brought in D. Wade and they've got all this experience now and everything's awesome. Okay, well, that's great, but now you got to use that experience to what I think should be called digging yourself out of this salary cap hole, because that's what you're in. You're in a salary cap hole right now. You don't have a lot of flexibility. It's very rigid in what you can do, and you also don't have the option to be a bad team, to like just blow the whole thing up and go back to being a lottery team. That's not an option.
There's no such thing as blow the whole thing up.
Yeah.
And I love the guy that on Twitter 1,000 times, you know, on Friday, Saturday, and yesterday was like, blow the whole thing up, trade everybody. Donovan's the only untouchable. Well, that doesn't exist in real world NBA terms, right? Rudy Gobert is untradeable at this point. He has very little value. I told you Friday on the show that I just spoken to an NBA guy who said guys like Ben Simmons are untradeable right now. And then what does Ben Simmons come out and do? He backs that up by being awful in Game 7. You look at Rudy Gobert, the Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, awesome. He got exposed by Terrence Mann. The Clippers did exactly what we knew they would do when we talked about this in March, where they switched a guard onto Rudy, and that guard went berserk.
From the corner. You specifically said from the corner. I just want to point that out.
Because that's what the blueprint on Rudy Gobert is. If Rudy Gobert is switched onto a guy at the top, it's easier for him to defend the paint. When you pull a guy into the corner, it's a long route to get back to the paint. So all I'm saying is Rudy Gobert is untradeable. If we switch gears here and get into how the roster needs to change, the overall theme of roster reconstruction for the Jazz is they have to get more athletic. They have to be able to guard all across the front line. You have to be able to guard the perimeter and the post. How do you do that? You have to upgrade your depth, because let's be honest about who's going to be here. Rudy and Donovan are going to be here. I think your only real tradable commodity is Bojan Bogdanović. He's making, $18 million?
Yes.
He is the guy that is really tradable. So if you're going to trade to rebuild your roster, it's probably Bojan Bogdanović, which is good as long as you get somebody in return that is far more athletic and able to defend at a higher rate with more success than Bojan is. He's an unbelievable three-point shooter. When Don's not in the lineup, he's great with his back to the basket. But the point is, everything is built around Donovan Mitchell offensively. And Jake, I think Bojan Bogdanovic is really your only tradable chip.
Yeah, and the cool thing is that the positive with that is that he's got a ton of value right now. I mean, when is he going to have more value than he had after what he did this year? The problem isn't what he's able to bring to a team. The problem is that the team that you're trying to create, he doesn't really fit into because, like you were just saying, and we've seen this multiple times, when Don's on the floor, Bogey doesn't get the ball. Bogey rarely gets the ball when Donovan Mitchell is on the floor. When Don's off the floor, Bogdanovic is a different player. So for a different team that doesn't have Donovan Mitchell or doesn't have that mainstay superstar, if you will, Bogey is a great fit, and he's got a ton of value after what he did this season. So he'd be a guy that I'd be trying to move. Again, $18 million a year. That really helps your cap situation, assuming that the guy you pick up, you would be paying less, ideally. Yeah, I think he's one of the main guys. I also think that, if I'm the Jazz, like in regards to who I'd want to keep, I'd want to keep Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench. I thought he did a pretty good job down the stretch, giving you production. I mean, part of the reason that you got out to that lead in Game 6 was because of what, Jordan did. So that would be a third guy that I would want to keep. However, I'm not, desperate or dead set on it. I just would like to keep him.
Yeah, and I think when we look at who's really tradable again, I mean you're not trading Donovan Mitchell or Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
You're just that. I think that's how your team is built. And I think Jordan Clarkson is exactly what you need in a six man. He's going to come in and he's going to fill it up. I mean, guys like Joe Ingles right now, I just don't think Joe has a whole lot of value.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think he is. There is value in spot 3-point shooters. There is. And he is a very good one. But that's what Joe Ingles has value in. He is not somebody that you can say, hey, bring the ball up for us, because at that point he doesn't contribute beyond that.
But just to butt in, they asked him to do that a lot. And that's like one of the prime examples of why this roster is just not built well right now. You're asking guys like Bogdanovic and Joe Ingles to do things that they're not great at. And again, I want to keep saying this isn't a bash Jingles and Bogdanovic segment. What we're doing here is we're pointing out that, hey, because you didn't draft well, you went and signed these guys, and you're essentially trying to say, okay, we're going to overpay you, but we're also going to ask more of you than you're probably realistically capable of, you know? And then you go and look, and again, all this is public information, by the way. You can go and find all this on the internet, but like you look at the Clippers, Reggie Jackson, the guy that's been torching you, is making like $1.8 million a year. $1.8 million. And Bogdanovic is making $18 million. So the Jazz are overpaying the player and asking the player to take them places when they're not capable. And the Clippers and the Lakers are saying, hey, we're going to pay you what's realistic, and you are going to earn a bigger contract by playing well and outplaying your current contract.
And I think the best example on the Lakers is going to be Cantavius Caldwell-Pope, who essentially shot them to a championship in the bubble last year.
Yeah.
And I think that's the guy that this team doesn't have. I mean, you have a superstar in Donovan Mitchell, but when you play 4-on-5 offensively, as the Jazz have and will, it's very difficult to have, the other players that start for you, like Royce O'Neal. Royce O'Neal's another guy that I think is very tradable. His number is he's making $9 million a year or something in that neighborhood. He's a guy that is a good, not great on-ball defender, as we found out, but he can shoot the three with regularity. Other than that, I mean, I think you're locked in, and I see a lot of people talking about Rudy Gobert. Jordan McDonald says Rudy has some value for teams like Sacramento and Charlotte, teams that haven't made the playoffs in years. Gobert can raise the floor for those teams. Right, but the problem is, the Jazz can't even trade Rudy until October, number one. Number two, you're just getting into year one of a long-term $205 million deal.
41 a year.
A team like Charlotte is not going to get anywhere near that. They're going to want nothing to do with that because they have a young core that basically is going to get better every single dribble of the ball this year. They're not going to take a step backward and lock their cap up for a guy like Rudy Gobert who can give you nothing offensively. because we've seen this. Look at Joel Embiid yesterday. Joel Embiid turning the ball over 8 times. You cannot have a liability on offense if you are a team like Charlotte. It just doesn't work. You can't consistently turn the ball over. I look at a team like Sacramento. Sacramento's a fast, quick team. Rudy Gobert does not run the floor. He's not a guy that you can say, hey, run rim to rim and, finish on the break. That's not who Rudy is. He's occasionally going to catch a lob on the break. Great, okay, cool. But you can't throw him the ball at the top of the key on the break.
Yeah.
That's not. Sacramento's a 3, and they need to be a D team because they're terrible defensively. But they're awfully young, right? And do you really want, if you traded Rudy Gobert to Sacramento, what are you going to get from them in return? Do you really think they're going to give up a Buddy Hield and De'Aaron Fox? Because that's what you would want
Rudy?
from them. Are you kidding me?
Nah.
There's not a trade to be made there. And by the way, I'd also remind you, you have to get dollar for dollar, especially when you're paying the luxury tax. You can't just trade Rudy for a bag of basketballs. I mean, there's no basketballs that are worth $205 million. You've got to match up the contract. So what's that mean? There's got to be 3 teams involved. And you can't make that trade till October when training camps are open and you're, seeding the foundation of your team. Here, let me give you all of the intelligence for our team and then trade you away so that a championship contender, arguably in the Jazz, that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
And by the way, are you really going to trade Rudy in the Western Conference? That's never going to happen. You're just not going to do that. The model is there. Everybody knows what you need in the NBA today. You need elite mid-range shooting. And for all the people who said I was dumb and this is a 3-point league, again, I will just point out that the 2 teams left in the West are not gunslingers from 3. They're the Clippers, who are absolutely a mid-range team, and the Phoenix Suns, who their 2 best players are arguably the 2 best mid-range players in the NBA right now, and Devin Booker and Chris Paul. So you have almost no mid-range game other than Donovan Mitchell on the Jazz. That's got to be what you're upgrading. Athleticism, mid-range, defense. You've got to become better defensively. I don't know how else to illustrate that than Terrence Mann in the corner and the Memphis Grizzlies and the LA Clippers, Kawhi Leonard dominating you at the free throw line in the pull-up jumper mid-range game.
Yeah, and they're able to create mismatches whenever they want to.
Yeah,
that. And
I would agree.
That's the true indicator of not being good defensively. They're happy to switch onto one guy and take advantage of that one guy. And again, it's unfair to be like, well, Rudy sucks now. It is him being a big. I don't care if it's Rudy Gobert or Valanciunas or Joel or Jokic. Kawhi Leonard's going to chew all those guys up. That's just what it is.
I think people don't realize how difficult it is to make trades in the NBA. It's not just we'll trade Rudy Gobert and we'll pay 25% of his salary. You're only allowed to trade, if you're the Jazz, because of how poorly Dennis Lindsey has done in trades and in the draft. The Jazz can't even trade a first-round pick until I think it's 2026 because he owes the Memphis Grizzlies a first-round pick. And until that is satisfied, he cannot make a trade involving a draft pick. And by the way, you have the last pick in the first round this year.
Yeah.
So you have no value this year, and going forward, your picks are committed. And I would also remind you that as far as cash goes, because I see a bunch of people talking about pay some of Rudy's contract, by rule, the Jazz can only pay $5.9 million of his contract.
Which, again, on a yearly basis is $41 million a year.
So you're asking somebody to pick up $36 million a year on Rudy Gobert. Who's going to do that? Who's got the cap space to do that?
Yeah, man.
That's not an easy tradable contract. I mean, I think what would you say the Jazz biggest need is?
Yeah, I think at a core, when you boil the whole thing down, I think athleticism is it. I mean, because to play great defense, you have to have athleticism. To be in the mid-range, you got to have athleticism more than the guy defending you.
I think it's point guard. If I had to point to one position, I would say point guard.
Yeah, well, now, I mean, obviously, I would hope that it's obviously that you're not going to re-sign Mike Conley. I would hope that's obvious,
so.
but I don't know. But to me, it's obvious. So if we just assume that they're not going to re-sign Mike Conley, Yeah, I mean, yeah, you need a point guard. Listen, we saw it last night. I mean, if you watch the Suns game, you saw Campaign come in and spot start because Chris Paul's in the protocol, and that went just fine for the Phoenix Suns. That went fine. So, like, with the Jazz, you look up and down this roster, and I can't find another name here who could consistently run point for them. And that's why it ends up being Joe Ingles. And again, that's an issue. And furthermore, I would say in the NBA, there happens to be a plethora of guys who you can just say, hey, come in, play point guard for me at a very base level. Bring the ball up the floor, get us into the offense. There are guys you can find, man. There are plenty of guys that you don't have to pay a bunch of money to that can come in and do that for you. So that's I feel like they'll be able to address that, but I think they have greater aspirations. They want to win a championship.
Yeah.
So the challenge here is, hey, you're negative $20 to $24 million in cap space right now. So not only do you got to fix your money, but you got to get better while doing that. That is a huge challenge. So I almost feel like the easy way out would be just standing pat and staying like where you are with this roster. But I don't think that gets you any further to where you want to go. Because, by the way, let's not forget, this season, the Lakers were injured, right? You had a bunch of teams that were injured in the Western Conference.
Yes.
And that made it a bit easier to get to where you got. So if you think about it, hey, a fully healthy Lakers team, is probably a 1 seed, right? Then you've got the Clippers who, they're going to be that 2 to 4 seed depending on how they play. Then you've got the Phoenix Suns. Then you've got the Denver Nuggets. So arguably, with everybody at 100%, you're not a 1 seed. You're like a 4 or 5 seed, in my opinion. So that's why I say this year was very much an enigma. Next year, we'll get back to how it usually is, and that should scare you.
Yeah, and what scares you the most, and this is just my opinion, what scares you the most is you don't have a lot of money to do anything. You've basically got the taxpayer mid-range at 5.9, and that's going to buy you guys like Austin Rivers. You're going to have to trade guys. You're going to have to trade Bojan Bogdanovic, Royce O'Neal, Joe Ingles. I just don't think Joe brings you very much. I think Joe is a one-dimensional player at this point, and it makes it very difficult. He is to me a glue guy for the Jazz. I would not trade Joe Ingles. I would trade Royce O'Neal as soon as I could. I don't value Royce O'Neal very much at all. I really don't. I value Bojan Bogdanovic as a third, fourth option on this team. If he's, in my opinion, I think on a team like the Jazz, he should be a third or fourth option. The problem is that you don't have a second or third option right now. Yeah. That's the issue. Yeah. So right now, he's your number 2 option offensively, and you get exposed with that. But I would trade Bojan Bogdanovic because what you have to do is you have to have a goal of winning a championship in the next year or 2, because that's the window you play in this league. You're not playing in 5-year windows. Like I think it was Ace or somebody was talking about how that in the next 5 years the Jazz are capable of winning a championship. Well, yeah, I mean that everybody's capable of winning a championship in the next 5 years. Who in the NBA can you say is not capable of winning a championship in the next 5 years? 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said the Phoenix Suns, right? I mean, everybody's capable. It's simply the difference is James Jones is a better executive than Dennis Lindsey, right? Rob Pelinka is a better executive than Dennis Lindsey. And a lot of it is those guys, I think, had more flexibility because they drafted better. They put commodities in place. And by the way, the Suns still have commodities. So they still have ammo at this point to improve their roster in the offseason.
Yeah.
The Jazz don't. So let me read some of your comments because I think Brylark said Jazz fans are going scorched earth this morning. You are. And I'm just, what we try to do on this show, and I just want to be really clear about this, we value everybody's opinion. There's nobody here that, like, we pretty much read every comment that comes in. We value everybody's opinion. This guy sucks, trade everybody is not an opinion.
Yeah.
That's you being emotional. The Jazz will never win, and that's you being emotional. What we try to do on this show is have legitimate basketball conversations. We work very hard to be educated. We know the roster. We know the cap. We know the rules. We know who's available and what's available. I'd much rather have that conversation than fire everybody. Donovan's the only untouchable. Because, frankly, Donovan's not untouchable. And we were arguing about this before the show. I brought Jake to his knees in tears about it. And he was begging me to stop because I said, well, if the Brooklyn Nets called and said, hey, we want Donovan Mitchell, we're willing to give you, Kyrie and KD, and we'll take Joe Ingles and Donovan Mitchell. You're not doing that trade? Oh, no, that's right. Donovan Mitchell's untouchable, so we're not doing that trade.
Yeah, but no, we don't need to have that.
But you get my point.
I get your point, okay? I understand your point, but also, like, being realistic about, like, real-world situations and scenarios about, like, who would really...
Nobody's untouchable.
Okay.
That's what I'm being realistic about.
Okay.
I mean, why? Okay, anyway. You really think Rudy Gobert's untouchable?
Yeah, right now I think you can't move him. Like
but
can't.
Would you if you could?
Well, yeah, I would, absolutely I would, but I don't think they have the ability to. I don't. Like I think like the reason that I specifically with Donovan Mitchell, the reason I say that you can apply the untouchable tag to him is because you're not like the Lakers aren't calling you about Don to trade LeBron, or the Nets aren't calling you about KD. I mean, if you could put a deal together, to replace Don with another superstar, okay, yeah, I guess, but that's not how this is going to work. That's not realistic.
Right, but I think you have to have the attitude that there's nobody on this roster that's untouchable.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think you can't, like, yes, because it goes from, hey, Don's untouchable to now the loyalty card's being played on guys that you should be moving. So that's the issue you run into. But what I'm saying is that if you just take all the loyalty out of it and you're looking at this roster for what it is, I want to keep Donovan Mitchell. The guy's a hell of a player. He's putting up 40 points in a playoff game, essentially in one leg. I mean, what can he do at full strength with actual guys who can help him? So yeah, I want to keep Donovan Mitchell.
And I think you're in a position where you're not stuck with the Sixers situation, where you have two guys who really, you probably need to blow that whole thing up. There's not a guy on that roster that you're married to.
Like at least the Jazz have chemistry, right? Like at least the Jazz, like they play together, like there's not like the issue isn't like team chemistry or any of that stuff.
I would agree with
relations with the players. Like in Philly, the issue is because Ben Simmons can't shoot a basketball and he plays guard, you have this weird dynamic. And so it forces Joel to press, and that leads to turnovers, and it's this whole weird situation. They don't have, again, I know this sounds insane, but when you're playing guard in the NBA and you can't shoot a basketball, you're not a championship caliber player. It's that simple. And I 100% agree. I think it was Charles Barkley who said you can't have, you're not a championship player. Again, they're showing this highlight 100 times on ESPN about Ben Simmons, passing out of that layup. And he said after the game he felt like someone was coming over his back, which I totally understand.
Gallinari.
But at the end of the day, the issue is that Ben Simmons is a passive player mentally. He wants to pass the ball. He doesn't want to score the ball. You're 6'10", 240. Go to the rack.
Right, but my point is, I think when you look at Donovan Mitchell, you're in a situation where you have somebody you can build on.
Yeah.
He's the only guy on this roster that you can say that about.
Yeah.
There's not another guy. So being loyal to Donovan, I get. Being loyal to anybody else is crazy. Jordan McDonald says Jazz should consider a sign and trade with Mike Conley. Mike Conley's a free agent. Why is Mike Conley going to sign and trade with you? Why would Mike Conley want to do that? Mike Conley at this point is writing his own ticket. He is going to get paid by somebody. Mike Conley's value is not $34 million. And again, when they traded for him, this is why I was so upset about it, because his value is not $34 million. His value today is probably, $16, $18 million?
And he's coming off, again, just so people understand, this contract that he just got finished with was a 5-year, $152 million max contract.
That you traded for.
You chose to sign up for that.
That to me is, Mike Conley needs to move on. The Jazz need to move on from Mike Conley.
Yeah.
Sign-in trades, and again, I would just remind you what the parameters of sign-in trades are. Like when you sign Mike Conley to a huge contract, you can't trade him right away. So it depends on the deal. Like the complexity of sign and trade deals, it's not worth it with a guy like Mike Conley.
You can't just get a piece of paper out, put Mike Conley's name on it, sign him for $1 for a year, and then trade him to whoever you want. That's not what happens in the league. Like, you guys got to understand, this is more complex than just basic concepts.
And do you understand who's on the other end of the phone? If you trade, like everybody's talking about trading Rudy, do you really think you're going to get dollar for dollar out of Rudy? What are you going to get back for Rudy Gobert?
Especially after what you just saw happen to him.
You're not. He is not worth probably in return. He's probably not worth 3/4 of that contract. You are going to eat significant money on that. And this is why I say invest in the bottom half of the roster to backfill Rudy Gobert. The problem is you owe Derek Favors $9 million. And I'm, again, that was a loyalty deal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, it's Faves. We're going to bring him back, and he wants to be here. It's an African-American player who wants to play in Utah. That was a mistake. You could have done better than Derek Favors. But you didn't because you were loyal. So the issue isn't really, it's not that you have Rudy Gobert as your number one. A, it's that you paid him, and B, you don't have anybody to backstop him. Oh, because Rudy can help us defensively. He's a great player, but you play 4-on-5, as Jake always says, offensively. So depth is where your money is going to be spent. My feeling is the core of this team is not going to change very much. I mean, if they come back intact with a new point guard, my guess is they'll be top 3 in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody will be like, oh, Dennis Lindsey, executive of the year. And I'm telling you, it's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Yeah.
You're Ryan Smith as a new owner. Unfortunately, the problem and the baggage that comes with replacing Dennis Lindsey is that means you're probably also replacing Quinn Snyder. And I think it would be a
big mistake.
Huge loss.
If
you wind up with a different coach a year from now than Quinn Snyder. I think that would just be a huge loss. And if you fire Dennis Lindsey, that's probably what's going to happen. And there's a lot of good coaches available. I'm a huge Rick Carlisle guy. So, hey, if Rick Carlisle's available and, go get it done. But Quinn Snyder is my coach. He's not the problem here, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Brandon Whiteside says Bogey isn't the problem. Conley needs to go. We need length, a 3-and-D type.
Bro, he's gone already.
Yeah, so the phrase 3-and-D, do you really want a 3-and-D player? And what 3-and-D means is they shoot threes and they play defense. You got to get over the 3-point shot in this town at some point, somehow, some way. It's cool that Bogdanovich knocked down 40-50% of his threes. What do you do in the mid-range? Why did this team struggle against the Clippers? Because they were forced into taking difficult 3-point shots. Because a more athletic Clipper team had their hand up and were picking you up above the 3-point stripe.
And in the playoffs, it turns into half-court basketball. You don't get the transition bucket.
Everybody falls in love with 3-and-D, and trust me, stop with that. You need complete players who can get to the basket, who can pull up and shoot. You need the prototypical player is Donovan Mitchell. Kevin Durant, the best scorer in the world, who can take a baseline jumper over any player on any floor, and he can get it anytime he wants, and usually it goes in. I mean, I don't know who's going to win the championship this year. If you had to guess, right, if I had to pick a team right now, it'd probably be the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Elite mid-range team.
Yeah.
Elite. Their 2 best players are elite mid-range players.
It is that, but also, I feel like with the Suns, again, just like I was saying about the Jazz, the Suns play together. Everybody, the way that team is built, everybody knows, okay, it's Book and Chris Paul, that they're the leaders of our team. And then everybody else is just falling into place. They're doing their job. DeAndre Ayton knows, hey, I got to rebound the hell out of the ball on both sides. That's number one priority. And then scoring comes second because I already know Book and Chris Paul are filling that up for us. Hey, I'm campaigning. Chris Paul's out in the protocol. My job is to not turn the ball over tonight. My job is to take care of the ball, make shots when I get that open look. I feel like sometimes with the Jazz roster, they're so obsessed with taking all these threes that when they get into half court basketball, they don't really know how to run offense that is inside the arc. Again, I feel like it was brought up 100 times while the Jazz were playing postseason basketball, whether it was against the Grizzlies or the Clippers. The pick and roll action disappeared from this team. They did not use Rudy Gobert in the pick and roll, and when they did, it was successful, and they still didn't use it a lot. So I just think that right now, you have to find a way to kind of break out of the situation money-wise. And I feel like the question really is, mentality-wise, let's say they do keep Dennis Lindsey. Okay, not much is going to change. That's just what it is. If you get rid of Dennis Lindsey and you change the front office, now I think the question you got to ask is, okay, how mediocre are we willing to be to fix our money situation? How desperate are we to move the Rudy Gobert contract? How hard do we want to work to be bad for 1 year? Not bad, but maybe a 5 or 6 seed as opposed to a 2 or 3 seed. How bad do we want that to fix what ails us? Because again, like you were just saying, the money situation is not good right now. Again, I just want to keep saying this. You essentially have to save a bunch of money on these contracts and find guys that can do more for you. That's a really difficult position to be in, and that's why you see the successful teams are never there.
Yeah, and I think it's guys like Joe Ingles who are going to make $13 million next year. That hurts you.
Yeah.
And the fact, again, I just don't see that you're paying depth well. I mean, I'm fine with Jordan Clarkson at 12.4. I'm more than fine with that number. But it's after that, it's Derek Favors at $9 million. And by the way, you owe him $10 million total, I think. That's a buyout to me. Or whatever you need to do, trade him. You got to move that number. I'm trading Royce O'Neal. I'm just not a Royce O'Neal guy. Those are the ways you're going to get out of this. You owe Bojan Bogdanovic $18 million, $18.7 million next year. I would trade that deal. I would do what I have to do to trade that deal somehow, some way. And you need a contributor back in return. Or you need a guy it's a 3-team deal and you get out from under somebody for a reasonable number so that you have more flexibility.
Yeah.
Those are the things that you're going to have to do. Let's get some more comments in here. Brylark says, what superstars are out there that the Jazz could target? I really think after being swept that he could be convinced to let go of Jimmy Butler. But is Jimmy Butler going to be happy in Utah? Jimmy Butler loves being in Miami, and I really think the Heat like Jimmy Butler. And by the way, Jimmy Butler is a chemistry killer. I mean, I think we've seen that everywhere he's been. It was a wreck in Chicago. Jimmy Butler's not the guy that you want here. He really is not. I love his game, but trust me, as somebody that's a Bulls fan for life, Jimmy Butler was a wreck. In Chicago. That guy you don't want that. Red Heart Norvis says, Jazz need to make a run for Brandon Ingram. Now, there is a fiasco with Zion. Oh, my God. The Zion Williamson issue.
Yeah.
Lonzo Ball's a guy that
He's available.
You should take a real good look at. That's a good young point guard. He clearly fixed his shot. And his ability to pass the basketball
and play defense.
That's a guy that's got every skill set and he doesn't say 2 words. He's not a problem. And I think he fits in really well to the way the Jazz play. I'd look at him. The guy you need is Kyle Lowry. But again, he's 35 years old and he's going to probably get $25 million.
Yeah.
So that point guard doesn't work. So the other side of that coin is, well, let's go young. Well, Lonzo's restricted. So you're probably going to, whatever you sign, you're probably going to get matched on. Brandon Ingram's an interesting player because, again, what is Brandon Ingram? He is a mid-range player. That's a guy, he's got a 3-point shot, but he likes playing in the mid-range. So I like that. I like Brandon Ingram a lot. Yeah. I think right now, if the Jazz could, or if the Lakers could go back and do it again, they'd have traded Kyle Kuzma instead of Brandon Ingram. I have almost no doubt about that. Sorry, comment dump coming in. Jordan Crabtree, your message got deleted by YouTube. Jordan McDonald says, I would take Halliburton and Harrison Barnes. I'm sorry, are you talking about for Rudy Gobert? You would...
That doesn't even work, though. Like
numbers-wise, that does not... Wait. Second of all, what exactly... Who's going to be your center at that point? You think Sacramento's going to trade for Rudy Gobert in October?
And they're going to give up their prized young point guard?
Come on.
It's not realistic.
I mean, I'm telling you, and I'll look up the numbers on Halliburton, and there's just no way that trade works. I don't see any way.
I like what you're getting at from a talent perspective.
Harrison Barnes is making $20 million.
That's not going to work. No.
And Tyrese Halliburton, I know, is on a rookie deal. He's making $24 million. How are you going to make that work? And they don't have a throw-in player because they owe nobody any money.
Because that's the other thing, too. That's a great point by you. You have to make sure I'm pretty sure you get penalized if you don't fill out your roster completely, right?
Oh, no, you have to fill out your roster.
You have to fill it out all the way.
Yeah.
So it's not like they could give up 3 to get 1.
Rudy, you can't, and remember, you can't trade Rudy until October.
Yeah.
By NBA rule because of the contract. You can't trade him till October. So they're not giving up Tyrese Halliburton. Him and De'Aaron Fox are probably going to die in Sacramento. They're just Sacramento may never win anything ever again. I don't know that they'll ever qualify for the postseason ever under any circumstance.
They're a fun team to watch, though. They play fast. They do. They're not great, but they do play fast.
Yeah, there's no way that with all due respect, I mean.
See, and that's the thing. And I know we got a lot of comments we got to get to, but I think just generally speaking, keep in mind that you can't just, with Rudy's contract in mind, yes, you can't trade him till October, but once you are able to trade him, you can't just throw him anywhere you want to. It has to make sense for you. Has to make sense for them.
And I'm not trading him in the Western Conference.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, too. You're not trading him in the West. Yeah.
There's no chance I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Sakshay says Rudy Gobert for Kristaps Porzingis straight up. Yet that would make you worse. Rudy has updated his bio and removed Utah Jazz. LOL. Okay. Jordan McDonald says, is that true? I haven't even looked at that. Jordan McDonald says, knowing the Jazz, they will stand pat. 4 seed next year. Where was Ryan at the buyout market? Where was he at the trade deadline? Where was he at the free agent buyout market? I agree. Yeah. Where was he when Austin Rivers was sitting home and Reggie Jackson was being talked out of retirement?
And all those people that told us we were dumb for saying
Mike James
this team
sucks.
Dude, a perfect example. Oh, Mike James sucks. Or any of these guys that we told you had to go and get. I got a bunch of heat on Twitter over Aaron Gordon. No, Aaron Gordon played horribly. Well, you didn't get farther than he did. You didn't get farther than he did, and he can do a lot more for you than a Jingles or a Bogdanovich can.
You had the same season Denver did.
Yeah, do people get that? You didn't get farther than Denver did, and Denver lost Jamal Murray, who's twice the player that Mike Conley is right now.
And by the way, I would point out that teams like Brooklyn, there's a lot of people giving heat to Brooklyn that they went out. Brooklyn was without Kyrie Irving. Did you see how much they got out of James Harden on one leg?
Yeah.
The guy couldn't shoot. But he was actually defending Giannis.
On the block.
Yeah. I don't know. It is what it is. Driftwood says, should the Jazz have kept Ricky Rubio?
Another player that you paid that can't do enough for you.
Yeah, that's the thing that really comes through about the decisions that Dennis Lindsey's made.
And look at the Suns too. This Rubio's a great example, right? Rubio was a Utah Jazz man.
Yep.
Let him go. Goes to Phoenix. Plays there for a minute. They let him go. Now where is he? He's back in Minnesota on a meaningless team because that's the kind of player he is. No offense to Ricky Rubio.
He's not a championship player.
He's just not. He's an average NBA player, and there's nothing wrong with that. The guy's a millionaire just by playing basketball. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't ask non-championship caliber players to try and win you a championship. Do
you understand how the Clippers are winning? The Clippers beat the Jazz because they got contribution. Did you see DeMarcus Cousins dunk? What are we talking about? You have no depth on this team. The LA Clippers came in here and worked you over with Patrick Beverley. They got big contributions out of Reggie Jackson, who's making $1 million. That's what you should be targeting. Guys who are affordable that contribute. And they are out there. And please, Dennis, if you don't get fired, please draft better. Please just give me one.
But that's the problem, right? When's the last time you saw a guy who's crappy in the draft figure it out in the draft? That almost never happens.
Yeah. Joe Ingles should take the Udonis role for us, Dante May says.
Yeah, well.
I don't know what the Udonis role is. That never plays?
The Udonis role is, hey, we're going to sign you as a player, but essentially you're a coach. That's the Udonis role. And
he
then
shoots the three too well.
And then you come back in for 30 seconds and get ejected and become a folk hero, essentially.
Yeah. Sakshay Jazz says, can't give $41 million a year for a traditional big man. Waste of money. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And that's why I say.
See, where was all this waste of money talk when he signed this deal and we crushed him for it?
Well, hold on. But I agree with you. But again, I just want to point out, when he signed that deal, I told you guys then, and I'm bringing it up now, that everybody was saying, oh, Defensive Player of the Year, great contract. We told you that day this was a bad contract, and it would come back to get them. And not only does it come back to get them, I'm assuming, I have a sneaking suspicion, just my opinion, no proof of this, sneaking suspicion that because Dennis Lindsey knows that it's time to pay up on this contract, that's probably why he wasn't particularly aggressive in the trade deadline and the free agency market and the buyout market, because he knows he's got money coming.
The Jazz are paying $11 million in luxury tax.
Explain why that's such a brutal thing.
Because it's 2-1. You're 11 mil. What could you do with $11 million?
A lot.
I mean, you're the Utah Jazz. For the last decade, Dennis Lindsey, going on a deck 10 years, I think he would 2012. I think he became the general manager. The last decade, you've drafted horrendously. I mean, awful, terrible. Your free agent signings haven't really worked out. I mean, the Jordan Clarkson deal is a good one. The Donovan Mitchell deal is a good one. The Rudy Gobert trade with Denver is a good one. Make only trades with Denver, Dennis. I mean, it's frustrating.
Yeah, 2012 was when he joined the Jazz.
It's really frustrating. Jordan McDonald again says, Jazz have to try to move Gobert. You're not. But why pay all that? Why pay all the penalty and take the misery now of trading Rudy Gobert when instead what you should do is move Bogdanovich, move Royce O'Neal, bring yourself more depth, and work the free agent market. Go get an Austin Rivers. Deal with Austin Rivers as your backup point guard.
Yeah.
Like, go and do that. Go and sign a Mike James type guy that's not going to cost you anything more than a mid-level, half of a mid-level, to go and contribute and compete. This team with Austin Rivers would have been exponentially more able to compete with the Clippers than they were now. Exponentially more. Is Austin Rivers going to turn the ball over inexplicably? Yes, he is. Yes, he is. But is he also going to knock down several big threes for you to keep you in a game? Yes, he is. Is he going to play pretty good defense? He is. Is he going to compete? Yes. I mean, I'm telling you, you can't. You have to sacrifice because of Rudy's contract.
Yes.
You're not going to trade him. He's not tradable. This is not the Lakers. You're not drafting well. You're not. Dennis Lindsey at one point in 2014, 2015 had so much assets in commodities. And everybody thought the world was ending when Gordon Hayward left. It wasn't. That helped you, right? Like, if you hadn't hung on to Gordon and Enes Kanter, how long? Anyway, the point is, don't even get me started on that era of basketball. Brylark says the only way Conley is back next season if we sign on the cheap. Probably it is he can get tons of money to start on a crappy team.
Yeah.
Mike Conley's not coming back next year.
Yeah.
He's a $20 million point guard in this league. He will get $20 million. You're not paying Mike Conley $20 million.
He's in that part of his career where he's going to sign 2-year deal after 2-year deal until he's ready to retire. And they're going to be $20 million a year deals.
Yep. Jackson says, Jazz had a great regular season, but we're playing checkers with the Clippers and Suns who were playing chess. Exactly right.
I completely agree, man.
Yep. Let's see. Spencer Morgan, you guys were right. Booker is better. Well, I mean, Donovan Mitchell's a hell of a player. I have nothing but praise and accolades for Donovan. I think sometimes he was forced into hero ball and nobody is going to tell him not to. because I don't think Donovan trusts his teammates. I think that was very clear. Donovan Mitchell has never looked at Bojan Bogdanovic and said, I got to get him the ball. He's never said that. He's never looked at Jordan Clarkson and been like, I got to get him the ball. That's not happening.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell wants to give the ball up to get it back. And the ankle was clearly much worse than anybody knew. I think Donovan Mitchell's a hell of a player. Is Devin Booker better? I don't know. You know what? I'm not going to tear a guy down to make another guy better. I've told you since day one, the Jazz should have drafted Devin Booker. That they missed on it completely. But I also think that Devin Booker is one of the best scorers in the NBA. And Jake tells me on a regular basis I'm an idiot. So, I think Devin Booker, based on what he's doing now, is about to step into the elite class of player in the NBA. And if he continues to put up, 30, 40-point triple-doubles, which he probably won't. He's not a triple-double guy. But why did he do that? Because they needed him to do that. And so we put up its assists and rebounds, which is,
huge.
For him, that's massive. And his ability to shoot the basketball, Devin Booker is struggling from three. He did not have a good season shooting the three. I guarantee you, it's not even that I'm guessing. I know for a fact that he is on the phone regularly with Chris Brickley, and they watch. So the reason that guys like Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker, you see them tweak things during the season, is they work with guys like Chris Brickley. There's a guy named Lethal Shooter who has pretty much everybody in the NBA that's a great shooter works with him.
Except Ben Simmons.
And those guys routinely, when they go to New York, they meet with Chris Brickley. They have a private workout. They get on iPad and they review video. And you know what? The other trend in the NBA right now that I think the Jazz really need to look at is there's a guy named David Alexander in Miami who was LeBron's body coach for several years. And he is working with NBA franchises now to teach their training staff how to improve. Like, did anybody notice the Lakers fired their trainer the other day? And it's there's like 2-3 teams who have fired their trainer. The Brooklyn Nets are said to seriously be looking at firing their training staff because of all the soft tissue injuries. Because to the Lakers' point, and the reason that I think the Lakers fired their trainer is because when you have soft tissue injuries like Anthony Davis had, that's a lack of preparation. When you twist your ankle and you're out for the year, that's not a lack of preparation. When you have groins and hammies, and that's a lack of preparation.
Well, you remember a couple years ago when we were in Phoenix covering the Suns every day, Devin Booker had that string of injuries that he went on, and then they moved on from their training staff.
They fired their entire medical team, the group that does their surgeries and their physical training staff. Fired everybody.
And all of a sudden, what happened?
And everybody said, it's just the Suns being the Suns. They're terrible. Well, all of a sudden, Devin Booker's been healthy. And it just, all these little things add up. Mike Conley, you have to keep your guys on the floor. And much to their credit, I look at guys like the Utah Jazz. They're pretty healthy. You're not surprised when Mike Conley's hurt because he's always hurt. But Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, their core guys played a lot of games.
Yeah.
Bogey, Jingles, like those guys, knock on wood, how often are they injured?
Yeah.
Not very often. So I would say that I would give the Jazz credit for that. Username says another thing, it's obvious going to be difficult to move Gobert with his contract, assuming team management would even consider trading him. Yeah, it's going to be very difficult.
That's the real problem, right? Like, I'm glad someone brought that up. Assuming that team management would even be willing to trade the guy. Like, that's the problem. You can't be closed-minded to who's available and who's not available and who you're willing to do deals with. I mean, I don't know, man. I just feel like the model is set in stone to win a championship in this league. You need two superstars on your roster that take up no more than 40% of your cap. That's where you have to be pretty much. And like 50, the Lakers are at about 50% with LeBron and AD. But if you're going to be at 50%, everybody else has to be under 10% of your cap so you can fill out your roster.
Yeah, and the hard part is you look at the way that model works, you better stay healthy.
Yeah, that's true.
You better stay healthy. And I think if you want to win a championship, you have to buy your top talent but develop your secondary talent. And it is, I'm telling you, it's why the Suns are where they are, because James Jones wouldn't trade his young guys.
Yeah.
And Mikal Bridges,
blossoming.
DeAndre Ayton's development offensively has been nothing short of remarkable, and his defense has even gotten much better. I mean, it has really been a tip to Monty Williams' cap that, hey man, you've developed these guys, and now you're going to play for a championship, in my opinion. So that's big. Username also says, you mentioned that teams should move on from Conley, but what if he's willing to come back at a discount? I'm done with it, because whether I pay you $1 or $100 million, if you're not on the floor, you're worthless.
Yeah.
You're worthless. You cannot count on Mike Conley.
What is the love obsession with Mike Conley?
He's a great player when he's healthy.
Yeah, but again,
he's a great player.
Like, when he's healthy, what would you rather have? Ben Simmons, who can't shoot a basketball, or Mike Conley, who's never on the floor? I mean, honestly, like,
I'd probably take Ben Simmons, to be honest with you. A guy that can attack the rim at least, and I know is going to be on the floor. Mike Conley, I hate guys who can't play. It is guys that are always hurt. There's two things I can't stand: if you can't stay healthy, and if you can't catch the basketball in the NBA. Those two things, you can't be on my roster.
Yeah.
If you can't catch the ball, I can't have you on the roster. If you can't stay healthy, I can't have you on the roster. Anything else, I can teach Ben Simmons to shoot. I'll pay Chris Brickley, I'll pay Lethal Shooter to teach Ben Simmons to shoot.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it. I cannot teach you to stay healthy. I can't. And I don't know what Mike Conley's off-floor routine is. But
whatever it is, it needs help.
But my guess is he's just genetically not right to stay healthy. That's just strictly
and there
a
is
guess.
some of that. There are guys who are just more injury prone than other dudes.
Yeah, I don't know. Vision Gaming says Biden out Monty for president. Well, hey, everybody tells me I should run.
Monty for president of basketball operations for the Utah Jazz. Jesus,
right? Just 1 year. Let's see. Sakshay Jazz says Mitchell's basketball IQ is certainly lower than Booker. Well, I mean, that's an experience thing.
Okay, well, can you give me more than just the statement? Like, what makes you say that? I mean, Booker has way more to work with. Don essentially was playing on one leg. Like, I don't know. I can't say that I 100% agree with that.
Even when he's healthy, Donovan Mitchell shoots too much.
Yeah.
He is a guy, and one of the things that Devin Booker has learned is that you don't always have to shoot to be effective. We saw that on display yesterday. I mean, the passing to DeAndre Ayton, the alley-oop to Mikal Bridges, like those are easy plays for Donovan Mitchell to pull up or go to the basket and get fouled on.
Yeah, he could be selfish.
But he's evolved. Donovan Mitchell just needs to play more basketball. Donovan's a great player. I mean, he's going to be amazing. Sakshay says they drafted Trey Lyles, LOL. Dennis needs to go. I agree with that.
Yeah.